Hello and good evening, everyone. My name is Zarine Khan, and I welcome you all to Career Talk Live webinar for the aspirants of UPSC. The HinduZone is a career counseling and guidance platform that provides guidance to the aspirants of different competition examinations like UPSC, SSC, CLAT, NEET, IIT, JEE. So we guide you through our special guest and mentors, those who joined us here. And today we have very special and very eminent personality with us, Mr. S.N. Sahu, and he served as an officer on special duty and press secretary to former President of India, K.R. Narayana, and he was director in Prime Minister office and ex-joint secretary of Rajya Sabha. And we have Dr. Bijendra with us, who is ex-faculty of Delhi University, and presently he is teaching at Plutus IAS, and he is a faculty of PSIR. Welcome, Sahu sir, to the Hindu Zone. Sir, your mic is mute.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you
Is
so
it
much, sir.
audible?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much that you spare your time for us and sharing this lovely webinar with us. And we are very pleased to have you. Sir, today we are going to talk about role of Rajya Sabha in Indian democracy. So I'll start with Vijendra sir. सर आप थोड़ा सा एक बेसिक रोल और फाउंडेशन ऑफ राज्य सभा के बारे में एक इंट्रो दे दीजिए सो दैट वी कैन स्टार्ट विद एसेंस हाउस सर.
So can we speak in bilingual or particularly in English?
Yes sir, we'll keep it bilingual. Yeah.
Bilingual. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Hello friends and hello sir. Good evening. And it's a very good moment that we are meeting each other in a webinar to discuss a very important topic, and that is the role of the Rajya Sabha. This is year 2022. If we look the genesis of the Rajya Sabha, the genesis lies in the Government of India Act 1919, right? And the Council of State, that time it was called a Council of State, that came in existence in 1921, right? And if we look at the 100 years of journey of this institution, right, except when the Constituent Assembly was framed, and it was also worked as a provisional legislature, that was a particularly unicameral, right? And then after that, the Rajya Sabha, basically the Council of State, came into existence after the first general election, 1952, February 1952, right? And first meeting, I think it was May 1952, that took place in the Rajya Sabha. And it was a debate in the Constituent Assembly that whether Indian democracy would adopt the second chamber in the parliament, right? So and it was unanimously accepted that because we are a very diverse country, India is a very diverse country, so that second chamber would be a very important to deal with the federal polity of the Indian scenario, in Indian case, right? So Rajya Sabha became the upper chamber, upper house of the parliament, and we know that parliament has a three important um, point cardinal, like first Rajya Sabha, and then Lok Sabha, and then president, right? And the Rajya Sabha has a very, very important role. Let me tell you, let me explain the strength of the Rajya Sabha. If you talk about the strength of the Rajya Sabha, it is a 245 as of now. The maximum strength could be 250. Out of 245, 225 are elected from the provincial legislature of the various states, and 8 are elected by the UTs, 4 from Jammu and Kashmir, 3 from Delhi, and 1 from Puducherry, right? And Rajya Sabha represents the voice of the various states, and each state has representation in the Rajya Sabha, and that is based on population, right? So if you see the UP, which has a largest population, has maximum number of Rajya Sabha member, 31. But if we talk about a smaller state like Goa or Mizoram or Manipur, which have or Tripura, which has only one member in the Rajya Sabha. So there is a not symmetrical representation of each state in the Rajya Sabha. It is a very asymmetrical because it is a based on population. Now, and that would be if you look at the Rajya Sabha, member of the parliament is fixed on the till 2025, and when there will be new delimitation commission after 2031, the membership will be increased. And there is a controversy regarding the states of north and state of south, because state of north has more population, so it will send more member up to the Rajya Sabha than the states of the south, and there's a huge debate anyway. So if we talk about the allocation of seats in the Rajya Sabha, basically fourth schedule of the constitution allocate the seat of the Rajya Sabha, right? And Rajya Sabha is a permanent body, right? It's not subject to dissolution. And if we talk about the Rajya Sabha, it also are very important organs of the parliament. It is a upper chamber. In 1954, it was renamed as a Rajya Sabha, and it play a very vital role in Indian democracy, right? Before talking about that, if you talk about the term of year of the member of the Rajya Sabha, basically Constitution does not deal with it. Basically, it is a Representation of People Act 1951, which talks about the term of year of the member of the Rajya Sabha would be the 6 years, right? And 2/3 members are retired after every second years. That is the strength. And if we talk about the power of the Rajya Sabha, the power of the Rajya Sabha is very, it's also not symmetrical to the Lok Sabha. In some case, Rajya Sabha has more power. In some case, Rajya Sabha has less power. In some case, Rajya Sabha has equal power. For example, uh, if you talk about the equal power between Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha, so in all ordinary legislation, Rajya Sabha has equal power as per the Lok Sabha. But if we talk about the financial money bill, Lok Sabha has special power, right? And Rajya Sabha is powerless in this context. So in this case, Lok Sabha has more power. Third case is when the Rajya Sabha has more power. For example, Rajya Sabha can empower the Lok Sabha to make any law on any subject of the state list, to serve the national interest as per Article 249. So in this case, only Rajya Sabha can empower the parliament to frame a legislation, to make a law, right, to serve the national interest. Rajya Sabha only, can, authorize the parliament to initiate a new all India services like medical services or other, right? So Rajya Sabha has also more power, more power in some case. If we talk about relevance of the Rajya Sabha in nowadays, actually there are many questions on the Rajya Sabha, that whether it is a stepney to the parliament, right? Because or because the member of the Rajya Sabha are not directly elected, right? And it has become institution of obstruction, especially when there's a there was a coalition government since 1990s, right? And it also there's a lots of expenditure on the member of the Rajya Sabha. There are various argument against the Rajya Sabha, but there are many various argument in favor of the Rajya Sabha. For example, we can say that the Rajya Sabha actually um, just you can say contribute in deliberation of the any particular bill, right? And as we know that the parliament is a central legislative organs, right? So, and if you see the few bills, for example, the reservation for women bill was passed by the Rajya Sabha, but it was not passed by the Lok Sabha, because Lok Sabha there was so much controversy. If you look at the few legislation that was initiated by the Rajya Sabha, which has very important, right? For example, rights of the transgender person bill, right? So in this sense, Rajya Sabha it has more important, and Rajya Sabha has, Rajya Sabha has been playing a very decisive role and in Indian Parliament. So that is the basics about the Indian Parliament. Rest would like to hear from the Sahu sir, including me, Sahu sir. Now it's to you, sir.
Sir, we really want to know that it's saying that the Rajya Sabha plays role of a safety valve in Indian polity. So please start your views on that.
Are you
Uh,
asking me or sir?
Sahu sir.
Acha.
okay, so I'll start it, or you want me to answer that question?
So you start with your thing first, like
Yeah,
whatever you have
exactly.
prepared
Mm.
for the students, and then we'll start the questions.
Okay. So thank you so much for getting this opportunity, to share some thoughts on the functioning role and functioning of Rajya Sabha in Indian polity. This is a very important subject in the context of our democracy, which is facing so many challenges today. As much as the democratic traditions across the world, is now caught up with numerous problems. So, if you look at the debates in the Constituent Assembly on the creation of the Parliament or the establishment of Parliament within the constitutional framework of our democracy, we find that members of Parliament, members of the Constituent Assembly, they were in favor of a second chamber, that is the Council of States, which is known as Rajya Sabha. Now, many members obviously wanted that there should be a second chamber to discuss, the history and the heritage of India. Many others wanted a second chamber, the revisory chamber, so that any legislation passed by the House of the People, which is the directly elected house of the apex legislature, in case it passes any legislation with haste, then Rajya Sabha will act as the revisory chamber. It would apply its mind to revise the legislations hastily passed by the the lower house. So it was primarily considered, the second chamber or the upper house, which is represented by the Rajya Sabha, is primarily considered as a revisory chamber. It is a house of elders because very sorry, senior and seasoned people, with wealth of experience in public life, they normally come to the upper house, and therefore their experience, wisdom, and their long-standing acquisition of talent in public life that puts them in good state to deal with the problems and the challenges that we confront in our democracy. So this is a permanent chamber. It is not subject to dissolution, as was explained earlier. The Article 80 of the Constitution talks about the composition of Rajya Sabha, and it was explained earlier that it consists of maximum it will consist of 250 members. As of now, there are 245 members. 12 of them are nominated by the President of India. Nominated, on the grounds of art, literature, science, and social service. And it is indirectly elected house. It is not directly elected house, as is the case with Lok Sabha. And it is a continuous body. Every 2 years, some members retire, and then new members get elected. Because it's a continuing chamber, so it has its own relevance. Unlike Lok Sabha, which is subject to dissolution, whenever it completes 5 years of its tenure, or whenever it is dissolved, on the advice of the Prime Minister. Okay, so these are the unique characteristic that if a unique characteristic of Rajya Sabha is that it's a continuing chamber. It has nominated members, 12 nominated members, and then it is indirectly elected, and so forth. And another interesting feature of Rajya Sabha is that it doesn't have, the reservation of seats for SCs and STs is not applicable to Rajya Sabha. Reservation of SC STs, they are only applicable to Lok Sabha. So you never find that so many seats of Rajya Sabha are to be filled up by scheduled castes or scheduled tribes or OBCs. Nothing of that sort. Reservation is only applicable to Lok Sabha, not to Rajya Sabha. Okay, so this is another very interesting feature of Rajya Sabha. And now let's come to the functioning of the Rajya Sabha over a period of time. Now, Parliament has three functions. First is lawmaking function of Parliament. The laws prepared by the legislature, be it Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, you know, the laws would be introduced or the draft bills would be introduced in either house of the Parliament. Okay, and then those bills would be discussed, would be voted upon, and when they are passed by both the houses of Parliament, those bills are sent to President of India for assent, and when the President assents it, then after the notification of those you know acts of Parliament assented to by the President, that become the law of the land. So law-making power is a critical aspect of the functioning of Rajya Sabha. The second functioning of the Rajya Sabha is that it is a deliberative chamber. Apart from law making, Rajya Sabha deliberates on issues raised by the members on the floor of the house. Okay, so the law making and deliberative functions, they define the parliamentary, both the houses of Parliament. The third functioning is that the government is held accountable to the legislature. So the other power of the Rajya Sabha is that it would hold the government to the account. Our parliamentary democracy is based on accountability of the legislature to the executive. Whereas in presidential system of government, the government is stable. It is not accountable to the legislature. But here the government is accountable to legislature. Therefore, one of the functions of the parliament is to hold the government to account. See, in American system, that is the presidential system, the executive or the government is stable. But here the government is accountable. So the stability of the executive in the presidential system is the defining feature. But in case of parliamentary system of governance that we have adopted in India, the defining feature is the accountability of the executive to the legislature. It is not the stability of the executive, but the accountability of the executive. So this subtle difference has to be borne in mind. While American president is not accountable to the American Congress, here the Prime Minister of India is accountable to the Lok Sabha and even to the Rajya Sabha. Okay. But the point is that, but the collective responsibility of the cabinet, headed by the Prime Minister, they are accountable. The collective responsibility held to be, they are collectively responsible to the Lok Sabha. But Rajya Sabha also, holds the government to account in a different manner by asking questions, by censuring ministers, by you know, examining the bills. Okay, so these are the processes through which the government is held accountable. So there are three functions of the Rajya Sabha, I mean Parliament, that is law making, deliberative, and the power to hold the government to account. Okay, so we need to be mindful of these three parts of the Parliament, be it of Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. Now, having said this, you know, let's examine the law-making power of the Rajya Sabha. Any bill can be introduced either in Lok Sabha or in Rajya Sabha. So Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha has similar powers as far as making law is concerned, except in the field of money bill, as it was said earlier. Money bill, money bills normally are bills which are certified by the speaker, under the particular provision of the Constitution of India. So once the speaker certifies that it is a money bill, then it can be introduced only in Lok Sabha, and after it is discussed in the Lok Sabha, passed by Lok Sabha, it comes to Rajya Sabha. If it doesn't clear that bill in specified time frame, that is 14 days, then the bill is deemed to have been passed by Rajya Sabha. Any amendment suggested to the money bill, if it is not accepted by the Lok Sabha, then that is considered as those amendments are considered as having been rejected. So, except in money, on some financial aspects, Rajya Sabha has equal powers with the Lok Sabha as far as law making power is concerned. Any bill that is, any bill can be, other than money bill, can be introduced in Lok Sabha. Similarly, any bill, after having been introduced in Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha, they have to be passed by both the houses of parliament on the basis of required, strength or majority as prescribed in the constitution or rules of procedure of the house. Having said so, you see, the law-making power is such a power because in India it was, thought that a country which would remain subjected to centuries of foreign rule, then which remained uh, trapped in the traditions and customs, and therefore the changes could not be brought about in a society. So it was considered that instrumentality of law should be used, for social change, for empowering people, to address the problems of inequality, the problems of unequal access to the resources, to the offices, and so on and so forth. So therefore, there are many historic bills which have been passed in Rajya Sabha. They have been introduced and passed in Rajya Sabha, and those bills have changed the destiny of our country. See, let me tell you, there are several bills concerning women's rights. First, they were introduced in Rajya Sabha. The Hindu Code bill, which Ambedkar introduced, aimed at empowering women, changing the personal laws of the Hindus. And one of the objectives of the Hindu Code bill was to ensure that women would have access to the property. They would have the right to property. Okay, they would have right to marry the person whom they want to. So they are progressive legislations. So initially, when there was opposition to Hindu Code bill, Ambedkar resigned from the Nehru cabinet, and later on Nehru government, it broke the Hindu Code bill to small pieces of legislation, and they were introduced. Most of them were first introduced in Rajya Sabha. Why some of the difficult bills which faces opposition, they are introduced in Rajya Sabha. The reason behind introduction of the bills in Rajya Sabha, the bills which are difficult to pass in Lok Sabha, those bills are first introduced in Rajya Sabha because, you know, Rajya Sabha is a continuing chamber. So if a bill is introduced, you know, with, because it's a continuing chamber, the bill continues. Okay, but suppose the Lok Sabha is dissolved, then the bill lapses because it is not subject to dissolution. So the governments choose to introduce first in Rajya Sabha because it won't be dissolved, so the bill would continue. So when the bill is continuing, then the government mobilizes public opinion in favor of the bill, persuades members in favor of the bill, and when the right opportunity comes, it is passed and taken up in the Lok Sabha. So, there was a reference made to the Women's Reservation Bill, which was passed in 2009. So, why it was earlier introduced in Lok Sabha, but it could not be carried forward. So therefore, Manmohan Singh government very thoughtfully decided to take it up first in Rajya Sabha, and it was passed. But enough support to it could not be mobilized during 2009-10 or till the resolution of the Lok Sabha. So therefore the bill lapsed. So this is the beauty and significance of a continuing chamber. The government chooses the House, the Rajya Sabha, to introduce a bill which faces opposition, but which are equally important, to pass, so that with those bills getting enacted, a lot of changes can take place in society in terms of empowerment of the people. So Hindu Code Bill, which was broken into several pieces of legislation, they were first introduced in Rajya Sabha because it was a continuing chamber. And Nehru government very, very strategically and very methodically mobilized public opinion in favor of those bills, and eventually those bills were enacted. So had there been no Rajya Sabha, the Nehru government would have faced problems. As much as Manmohan Singh government used Rajya Sabha to push through women's reservation bill, but eventually it could not be taken up in Lok Sabha because still the opposition persisted. Okay, so this is one point which needs to be kept in mind. Because of its continuing nature, because it is not subject to dissolution, the government uses the chamber strategically to introduce difficult bills or the bills around which enough public opinion could not be mobilized, for its passage and enactment. Okay, so this is one very, very important point which needs to be kept in mind. See, for instance, let me tell you that, as I told you, Hindu code bill, which were broken into small pieces of legislation, most of them were introduced in Rajya Sabha, and all of them got enacted. And when those bills, Hindu marriage and divorce bill, succession bill, even special marriage bill, all those were eventually enacted after their introduction in Rajya Sabha and their scrutiny in successive committees of both the houses of parliament. Nehru, as Prime Minister of India, he wrote in letters to the chief ministers. Nehru was the only Prime Minister who used to write a fortnightly letter to all the chief ministers. In those letters, he wrote, with the passage of those bills, concerning the women's rights and women's empowerment in terms of their access to property, in terms of their right to, the right to succession and so on and so forth, India's prestige got enhanced at the global level. So the enhancement of the prestige of India at the global level, because its parliament passed the legislation concerning women's rights, particularly marriage and divorce bill and so on and so forth. You know, this means the Rajya Sabha could enhance the prestige of India at the global level by passing those bills. Okay, similarly, the resolutions. There are bills and there are resolutions. The resolutions are introduced in Parliament, and when those resolutions are introduced by the private members, there are two types of members. One is called private member. Any member who is not a minister is a private member, even if whether they belong to ruling party or the opposition party. So a bill can be introduced by a private member. It can be introduced by the government, the minister. The minister is not a private member, even though he is a member of the House. Now, in the history of Indian Parliament, there are 14 legislations which have been enacted, and all those enactments owe its origin to the initiative taken by private members. Okay, those private members, bills which got enacted, they are very significant if you examine those bills. See, for instance, Rukmini Devi Arundale, she was a famous danseuse. She was so much moved by the plight of animals So therefore, she introduced a bill to prevent cruelty against animals. She delivered a moving speech on the floor of the House when Prime Minister Nehru was present. And Nehru, after hearing that speech, she requested Rukmini Devi Arundale to withdraw that bill so that the government would come forward with a comprehensive legislation. And eventually, Rukmini Devi Arundale withdrew the bill, and Nehru government came forward with a comprehensive legislation. And today, we have a legislation or an act of parliament to prevent cruelty against animals. So the law to prevent cruelty against animals owes its origin to a private member who introduced a bill, and in response to that, the government assured that it would bring or introduce a comprehensive legislation, and on that assurance, that private member's bill was withdrawn. Similarly, Mr. Tiruchi Siva, few years back, he introduced a bill concerning the rights of the transgenders, and he refused to withdraw that bill. And that bill was eventually passed unanimously. It created history in a parliament after 1971. Bill could not be passed in Lok Sabha. So you see, private members play a key role, in the Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha. So till 71, there were 14 private members bill which got passed, entered the statute book, and therefore, we have a law based on the private members bills which got enacted by both the houses of parliament. And Mr. Tiruchi Shiva's initiative to introduce a private members bill concerning the rights of the transgenders was passed by Rajya Sabha. It created history. Mr. Tiruchi Shiva became literally a celebrity for that historic initiative. I wrote an article on that. Okay, so therefore, these bills taken forward by the private members play a key role. Similarly, apart from bills, there are resolutions. For instance, one resolution, which was resolution means anybody can introduce a resolution, and resolution normally expresses the opinion of the House. Once the resolution is passed, this means the House is expressing an opinion on an issue which is of great significance. See, let me give you an example of a resolution which was passed. The resolution was introduced by a nominated member, a great literature called R.K. Narayan. You know R.K. Narayan, a great writer, Malgudi Days. Okay, he was a nominated member. He introduced a resolution saying that school children carry heavy school bags, the school bags carrying textbooks, and they are burdened by that school bag. So it is he said in that resolution he demanded that school the weight of the school bags should be lessened so that children would remain unburdened of the school bags, and that was passed, and it created sensation across the country. Okay, so this is a kind of a influence that the Rajya Sabha makes on public opinion, on issues which agitate the minds of the people, which exercises the conscience of the public. So similarly, there were resolutions which were passed for abolition of privy purses in Rajya Sabha. There have been resolutions which have been passed for gender equality, population control, and so on and so forth. So you see, depending on the urgency of the issue or the currency of the issue, members have been sensitive enough to take forward the cause of legislation. Either the bills or the resolutions. See, now you are debating, on issue of sedition. Even Supreme Court is examining, a petition to decide the legality of sedition. And there is a huge demand from across the country that sedition law should be abolished. 124A of the Indian Penal Code. Okay. Now, Mr. D. Raja, member of CPI, in 2011, he moved a bill for the abolition of sedition law or the sedition provision of the Indian Penal Code. So when the Law Commission prepared a report on sedition law, it referred to D. Raja's private member's bill, even Shashi Tharoor's bill. So, all these bills, all the resolutions introduced by the members, even though they do not get passed, but it makes an impact on the public opinion. It generates public opinion. It generates a narrative in favor of the issue which agitates the entire country. See, because the manner in which sedition law has been invoked repeatedly by Modi government after 2014, people have been arrested for saying India Jindabad, Pakistan Jindabad. People have been arrested for writing a news story that a chief minister will be changed. They have been charged with sedition. Some people have been charged with sedition for celebrating Pakistan cricket victory. Can you imagine? How can you charge somebody with sedition? People have been charged with sedition for all kinds of nonsensical small things. So therefore, there is a clamor of demand that sedition law should be abolished. But private member Mr. D. Raja, when he was a member of Rajya Sabha, he introduced a bill in Rajya Sabha. And when Law Commission prepared a report on sedition, it referred to D. Raja's private member's bill. And when I informed D. Raja that, sir, your private member's bill is now part of the Law Commission report, he was delighted because he didn't know that he has been mentioned. So look at the impact of the private member. So in early 50s, this, Rukmini Devi Arundale impacted the mind of Jawaharlal Nehru through her private member's bill, for a law to prevent, cruelty against animals. Similarly, there was a lady, another lady I'm forgetting, how the censorship on films. There was no censorship initially. Censorship on films owe its origin to a private member's resolution in Rajya Sabha. Okay, it has been mentioned by the then President of India, Venkatraman, in his speech on private members, bill. So, many such important legislations owe their origin to private members' bills. Okay, so this is important point. So therefore, lawmaking power of the Rajya Sabha is a significant power. Many historic, laws have got originated in Rajya Sabha. See, let me give an example. Uh, voting age is now 18. It was earlier 21. Several legislations, private members' bills were introduced to reduce it to 18 from 21 to 18, and one of them was done in Rajya Sabha. So this is what it is. The other aspect is deliberative chamber, that members raise important issues, and therefore this house deliberates on issues affecting people because Parliament represents the sovereign will of the people. It is the head and front of the body politic. Okay, it because people come to the house representing their aspirations, anxieties, frustrations, hopes, and their fond desire to improve their lives and to improve the standard of education, with their fond desire to have access to entitlements. So the deliberative chamber, which is played by the parliament, both the houses of parliament, that assumes significance. Let me tell you, in today's world, we are discussing in a big way climate change, global warming, environmental degradation, ecological disaster. Can you ever believe that in 1952, when Rajya Sabha started functioning, 13th May, Rajya Sabha started functioning, I think, 13th May or something, 13th May 1952. On 18th May, one member, his name is, you know, some Krishnamurti Rao. 18th May 1952, one Krishnamurti Rao, he talked about deforestation taking place in India. He talked about ecological degradation. He talked about rivers changing courses. He talked about industrial development impacting adversely on nature. 1952, one member, Pattaviraman, he talked about climate change in 52. So look at the deliberative, look at the role played by Rajya Sabha as a deliberative chamber, and members use that floor to express their apprehensions about the current phase of development. So this is the significance of Rajya Sabha. If you look at the debates of Rajya Sabha of 1952, you don't find such things, whereas in Rajya Sabha you do find. The other point, now electronic waste is a big issue. We are using so many mobile phones, so many computers, so we change our mobile phones. It was in Rajya Sabha first electronic waste was taken up for discussion. Okay, I sensitized the chairman of a committee, Mr. Turuchi Shiva. He was the chairman of industry committee. So I said, sir, let's take the issue of electronic waste, immediately convene a meeting. So you see, this is how Rajya Sabha and its committees play a critical role in taking up issues which are of crucial importance for society, for the nation, for the lives of the people. So deliberative as a deliberative chamber, see for instance members, they not only take up the issues on the floor of the house, they take up the issues in the committees of Rajya Sabha. Committees are mini parliaments. There are standing committees, there are department related, subject committees which are also standing committees. There are select committees and so on and so forth. So committees play as much important role as the house itself. So let me give you an example of these committees becoming a deliberative forum. In 77, the petition committee of Rajya Sabha took up a petition concerning air pollution. Air pollution is a critical issue we are confronting today, but in 77, the Rajya Sabha petition committee took up the air pollution issue. It submitted a report and recommended to the parliament that a legislation should be enacted to prevent pollution of air. That time there was no legislation to prevent pollution of air, and today you are confronted with air pollution in a big way. Every day our TV, weather bulletins talk about ambient air quality, pollution index, severe, hazardous, and so on and so forth. But it was taken up in Rajya Sabha way back in 77. So look at the significance of Rajya Sabha in taking up climate change issue in 52, air pollution in 77, and if you look at that report of the petition committee, very illuminating. Okay, so now this is the deliberative aspect, and members of parliament, they participate in the discussion. They deliberate on issues, and those discussions, they make an impact on the entire country, impact on media, civil society, and so on and so forth. So this is one, and the other point is holding the government to account, which is very critical, because parliamentary democracy is based on accountability of the executive to the legislature. Our executive is not stable, it is accountable. And consciously, we preferred accountability to stability. So, therefore, through questions, through special mentions, through calling attention notices, okay, and through other procedural devices, the government is held accountable. So, when the question hour is there, ministers, they are scared of question hour. So they say how to face the question. Okay, so therefore, it is an important forum to hold the government to account. So, I mean, eventually the government collectively is accountable to the legislature, and if it loses majority in legislature, then it resigns. The government is gone. But in Rajya Sabha also, there is a censure motion. They can be censured. It will be very embarrassment for the government to face censure motion. It is embarrassing if they do not reply to a question in Rajya Sabha. It is embarrassing if they do not reply to a calling attention notice. So through all these procedural devices, the government is held accountable. So therefore, accountability is not a question only related to Lok Sabha. It is equally a question which is related to Rajya Sabha. Okay, so having said this, lawmaking power, deliberative power, and the power to hold the government to account, we have discussed all these things. And then finally, let's discuss other aspects, for instance, the functioning of the committees. How in the committees the government is held accountable. See, when the nuclear deal was signed with America, you know, the Rajya Sabha Committee on Science and Technology examined that bill. And in that bill, it was stated that nuclear power stations, which would be established by employing technology from America or from other countries, in case of accidents in those nuclear reactors or power stations, the operator of the nuclear power or reactor would be held responsible. He would only pay compensation, only operator. But our members in the committees, cutting across party lines, you know, they were from BJP, Congress, CPI, CPIM, and so forth. They said, why operators? Suppose the technology is supplied by Americans and the technology is faulty, then the supplier of the technology should be held accountable, and that supplier will have to pay compensation to the victims of accident, not just the operator. So that bill was, the committee recommended to amend the bill, and the House accepted the recommendation. The bill was amended by providing that not only the operator but the supplier of technology will be held accountable. So you see how committees they scrutinize legislation. So it was done by Rajya Sabha committee. As a result, till today, American suppliers are not giving technology because they would be held accountable for any accident, and therefore they would be liable to pay compensation. Okay, so these are the aspects which need to be discussed properly. I'm just giving an example. So similarly, when the Jairam Ramesh as environment minister, he told on the floor of the house that they have established a committee to take up the issue of electronic waste. I immediately sensitized the chairman of the committee to convene a meeting, Secretary MSME, Secretary Environment Ministry. They all came together, and Secretary MSME said 75% of the electronic waste is dealt with by MSME, but we were never consulted before the law was, before the guidelines were framed by the minister. So because of the committee, the coordination could take place between the two ministries, and it was done by Rajya Sabha. And without any bill or without any resolution, it was done just by convening the meeting of the two ministries. So this is the role played to bring about coordination of different ministries for improving governance. So therefore, scrutinization of the bills, unfortunately now bills are not being sent to parliamentary committees. As a result, scrutiny of the bills are not taking place. Farm bills, which were introduced in Rajya Sabha, they were passed with voice vote, even though Tiruchi Siva demanded actual voting. Because they were passed with voice vote, this was in violation of the Constitution, which prescribes that actual voting must take place. So therefore, a wide protest took place, and therefore farmers' movement, and eventually government had to withdraw the bill, all the three bills. So if a bill, the law is made through deliberative and consultative process. Remember these two words, deliberative and consultative. You have to deliberate, you have to consult people, stakeholders. And when that deliberative and consultative process is negated by passing the bills through voice vote, then the entire lawmaking process is faulty. It is against the Constitution. So therefore, of late, bills are passed without adequate discussion on the committees, adequate discussion on the floor of the House. Hastily they are passed. In the House of Lords of the UK, it is stated that House of Lords acts as a house for quality control of the bills. So here, the Rajya Sabha as a revising chamber acts as a quality control, acts as a house to ensure quality control of the legislations. Unfortunately, all these processes are not being followed. As a result, it is said that Parliament is now declining. The role of both the houses are declining because the government is not referring the bills to the committees for scrutiny and examination. There's an interesting report of the House of Commons UK, which said that better scrutiny leads to better governance. So therefore, when the bills are not scrutinized in the House, the committees, so governance suffers. So therefore, it is important to augment the capability of Parliament, which is already there, the capability that has to be used by adhering to the constitutional provisions for actual voting, for adhering to the constitutional provision for scrutiny and examination of the legislations, and that is how the Parliament can function, Rajya Sabha can function better in a better way. Unfortunately, for last several years, many bills have been certified as money bills by the Speaker. So when it is satisfied as money bill, Rajya Sabha has no role to play. So therefore, money bill route is also taken by the government to dispense with the role played by Rajya Sabha for scrutiny and examination of the legislations. Okay, so this is a danger. This is a danger to the democratic system that we have today. It has never happened earlier. This is happening now. So we should be mindful of such challenges we are confronting today. We have been described as an electoral autocracy because of the lack of parliamentary scrutiny. So we need to change that by strengthening, augmenting parliament. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, he said parliament belongs to the opposition because opposition plays a role in holding the government to account, in asking questions, in scrutinizing the policies. So therefore, there is a famous saying that in a parliamentary system, the opposition will have its say, the government will have its way. Okay, so therefore let the government have its way, but let the opposition have its say. So this is how parliament has to function. So I think I will put a full stop at this, and now let's discuss by way of some questions. Thank you.
Bijendra sir, you can ask your questions, and I'll start with the questions I am getting from the viewers.
Thank you, sir, for your insightful speech, lecture. It was very soothing to hear with the entire lecture, and I learned few things that how many progressive bill was introduced only in the Rajya Sabha so that it can sustain. Otherwise, it will lapse with the dissolution of the Lok Sabha. Right. One thing that on the behalf of a student, I would like to ask, as you rightly pointed out that in the initial page of your lecture, that reservation for SC/ST is not applicable to the Rajya Sabha. Why is it so? It's a common question that arises. I know.
Okay. You see, Rajya Sabha represents the states, not constituencies, whereas Lok Sabha represents constituencies, not the states. Okay, so reservation system is applicable to only constituencies because see we have representatives in Rajya Sabha from Tamil Nadu, representatives from Kerala, representatives from Assam, Odisha, Telangana, Andhra. So reservation system is not applicable to states. It is applicable to constituencies. So therefore there is no reservation. So you won't see at the time of elections to Rajya Sabha any political party saying that we have fielded candidates, 27, 20, 15% for SCs, 7% for STs or OBCs. There is no such thing because it represents states, not the constituencies. So there, and the reservation system is not applicable to states, but is applicable to constituencies. That's why there is no reservation.
Thank you, sir. As you rightly pointed out that the Rajya Sabha is a institution of lawmaking. It is an institution of deliberation. It is an institution of representation, and it is an institution of accountability. That also applies to the Lok Sabha, right? But if we see the, for some measures like joint sitting, where Rajya Sabha has, less say than the Lok Sabha, how we can address this joint sitting measures in the
No,
to
no,
empower the Rajya Sabha
no, no.
basically.
You see, joint sitting. You see, the political parties, the Rajya Sabha as a whole doesn't exercise its vote as a monolithic body. There are members who will vote according to the party directions. Okay, so therefore, see, in terms of numbers, obviously Lok Sabha has more numbers, Rajya Sabha has less numbers. Okay, but there are several examples. I think there are three bills on three or four occasions where joint sitting has taken place.
Three, sir. Huh.
So therefore, members, they vote as per the party, not as per the house. Okay, so therefore, so that in a joint sitting also parties are actuated, or members are actuated, based on their party affiliations. So therefore, in joint sitting, obviously, any party which has the government and they have the majority strength behind them. So similarly, those parties, whose members are represented in Rajya Sabha, they will also join hands with them in a joint sitting, and they will easily pass. They will easily ensure that the bills are passed by in the joint sitting by both the houses. So here the point is, it depends on party strength. It's not on the house itself will not vote, as a monolithic body against Lok Sabha. So this has to be kept in mind.
Thank you, sir. One major concern that students ask, since the seats to the parliament is fixed till 2026, and the again delimitation commission will be reconstituted after 2031 census, right? And that will, increase the members in the Rajya Sabha as well as in the Lok Sabha. And the states of the north like UP, Bihar, Maharashtra will have more number, right? More MPs, more representation in the Rajya Sabha than the state of south, right? That is same applicable to the Lok Sabha as well, right? And the state of southern states like Tamil Nadu, Kerala are saying that we are paying the price of, good development or family planning, or right. So how can you see this debate between northern state and southern state of India regarding their members or in the parliament,
There is
including
a
the Rajya
demand
Sabha?
from there is a demand from those states that population of a particular census, population figures of a particular census should be taken into account, and not the latest population census be considered, because their fall in birth rate is far better than fall in birth rates in Hindi speaking states. So therefore, that parity has to be maintained. They should not be penalized for bringing down the fertility rates on account of their better human development indices. Okay, so that is the reason why they are, very strongly pleading for population figures population figures not on the basis of the, present census, the latest census, but the census, I think some years back, exact year I am not aware. So that has to be taken into account. Otherwise, they will be penalized and they will suffer. And their concerns have to be dealt with. And I'm sure that any sensible government will deal with that.
Yeah. There's a one last from on the behalf of a student as well. See, if the entire lecture, and you have rightly pointed out that the Rajya Sabha as an institution, play very important role in Indian democracy, and it has evolved as a very you can called intellectual, as it is called House of Elder. It has emerged as a progressive institution, right? Whether it is a right of woman or right of animal or rights of the transgender bill, as you have rightly pointed out. But it has been also, you said that by the political party, that since Rajya Sabha members are not directly elected and Lok Sabha members are directly elected, and Rajya Sabha members actually obstruct the passing of the bill, right? So can it be, possible that can can we say that Parliament can be more efficient without Rajya Sabha in Indian democracy to foster more rapid and efficient development?
No, 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 no. See, we have to have a second chamber, for considered examination of certain bills, and it has served us well. There are several examples when the Rajya Sabha has come up to expectations. Let me tell you, there are 3 or 4 times, or maybe 5 times, when the motion of thanks in President's address has been amended. You know, his motion of thanks in President's address has never been amended in Lok Sabha, but it has been amended 5 times in the Rajya Sabha. So this is a remarkable record. When the motion of thanks gets amended, this means there is a different opinion that is this house is expressing, and you can have a look at my article which I wrote for Indian Express some years back. So you can Google my article, role of Rajya Sabha, and then you will have a glimpse of what I have stated today, particularly referring to the history, etc. So Rajya Sabha, you cannot do that. You see, parliamentary democracy has been described in this basic structure of the constitution. Okay, so and when you say parliamentary democracy, obviously includes Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, and President of India. They constitute the legislative dimension of the constitutional scheme of governance. Okay, so abolition of Rajya Sabha will go against the very basic structure of the constitution, which is which is held inviolable by the Supreme Court of India in several of its judgments, apart from the SR Bomai judgment of 1992 and many other subsequent judgments. So therefore, this basic structure, embodying both the houses of parliament, they have to be sustained. It cannot be dispensed with. The ruling party, if it finds it difficult to push through legislations in Rajya Sabha, it has a grudge against Rajya Sabha. Even Mr. Arun Jaitley, when he was defense minister in 2014, and when BJP didn't have majority in Rajya Sabha, and then therefore it was finding it very difficult to push through legislations in Rajya Sabha. It very sarcastically stated that tyranny of majority is there in Rajya Sabha. He called it tyranny of majority. Okay, but that's a very needless comment, highly avoidable comment. We should not have made it because Rajya Sabha has played a significant role in the history of our republic. It's the second chamber, it's a legislative chamber, and it is a chamber for lawmaking. And we cannot exercise any impartial opinion or assessment of the house would make us proud. We should not at all think of dispensing with the bicameral legislature.
Yeah, one more query, but that's my personal query, sir. Actually, I wants to know basically if you look at the Public Account Committee, as you were talking about Parliamentary Committee, how the Parliamentary Committee play a very important role to make the government accountable, right? And we have seen that this Public Account Committee, which which has celebrated 100 years of its birth in 2021, right? So, but in the case of Rajya Sabha, which also took birth in the our Council of State, which took birth in 1921, we did not see such kind of celebration or that is in the parliament about the
No,
Rajya
no, no,
Sabha?
no. See, no, 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 no. Do not trace the origin of Rajya Sabha to 1921. See, Rajya Sabha is a democratic chamber because 21 Council of State, it was not a democratic chamber. There were several nominated members. So we should not trace the origin of Rajya Sabha to 1921. In any case, it has its own significance. So we should not take, British, the British era Council of State.
Thank you, sir.
Okay,
It's
so
a
there is a
great,
question from the viewer.
great learning for me. Thank you so much. And definitely I'll read your article in Indian Express, the role of the Rajya Sabha.
Yeah, yeah, you can Google those articles.
Sure, sir. Sure.
You can Google a Sense House article on Rajya Sabha. You will get
I'll
that.
definitely, will search it and will read it.
So
Thank you,
this
sir.
is one question from the viewer. I have received that women reservation bill in parliament, like 50% women, why it is not has been passed yet, and like unlike NRC bill.
Unlike,
NRC.
uh, okay, no, no, you see, in 2009, when the bill was passed in Rajya Sabha, there was a demand from RJD and Samajwadi Party, that there should be a reservation within reservation. See, the women's reservation bill got the support of, by BJP, Congress, left parties, PMK, AIDMK, and so on and so forth. But it didn't have the support of RJD and Samajwadi Party. They wanted reservation within reservation. For reservation among women, they wanted reservation for OBCs, OBC women. Okay, they wanted reservation for SC women, all that. But that would have been that would have been a problem area because you cannot have reservation within reservation. The lawyers say that to have reservation for OBC, I believe there should have been some changes in the constitution. I'm not very clear about it, but because of this demand for reservation within reservation, they wanted reservation for OBC women. So therefore, this bill could not be taken up in Lok Sabha because there was a persistent, you know, resistance from RJD and Samajwadi Party. That's why it could not be taken up.
Thank you so much, sir, for your insightful lecture and clearing all the questions of the viewers. And it is a pleasure to meet you online at least. And I hope we will hope you again for some more discussion.
Ma'am, I would like to tell you that Parliament is a very important subject for the UPSC aspirants. Right? I said, sir, the Parliament is a very important topic for the UPSC students. One day we can, if we can discuss on the role of the Lok Sabha, because it is a house of the people, right? It represents the will of the people, right? Real of the will of the people. It would be great for the students. And if sir would agree, we can have discussion on that.
Yes, sir, if you would agree.
What is the topic?
As a role of the Lok Sabha in the last 50 years, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Okay.
Hope you will give us a time, some time again, and we will discuss the role of Lok Sabha with you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Sure. Sure.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.